About 7 years ago, I began this journey of trading, which at the time I thought was impossible. Yet now I've bought a two-story house in the middle of a Spanish island, despite starting my entire journey in a small village in Denmark. And that's pretty much what we're going to talk about in this video. Now, what we're going to do here is not some high production Netflix set. No, we're going to do it in a very raw format so that I can pretty much just tell you exactly what I have in mind and what I think you need to know in order to improve from where you are now, because I know a lot of people feel stuck, and especially in trading, because this industry is so different compared to every other industry. You pretty much have to go through years and years of effort but no reward, right? So you spend all this time, you spend all this money, you spend all this energy trying to perfect this craft that pretty much gives you nothing in return. And that's what separates this industry from a lot of other industries, right? Because it requires a tremendous amount of belief in yourself and belief that you can, actually do this in order to finally succeed. Right? And I've gone through every single struggle that you might be out there struggling with, right? So everything that you're going through, there's, a pretty high chance that I've gone through that exact same thing. Now let's talk about it, right? Because I started probably a lot like every single one of you out there. I started in my mom's house. I had, very, very little to no money to my name, right? I had a regular job. I was a waiter. So I was waiting tables, and at night I was focused on my trading. And I did that for about 3 years straight. And I'm not talking, I dedicated a little bit of time here and there. No, I'm talking about pure isolation for 3 years straight. And I'm also talking about red numbers coming out of my account for 3 years straight. Right? I didn't make 1 cent for 3 years. The difficult part is the question that gets repeated inside of your own head. And it pretty much goes like this, at least for me, right? This is exactly how it goes. Is it possible? Is it at all possible to me? Is everyone else lying? Or am I just the odd one out who doesn't seem to be able to, to succeed in this industry? And it's that question alone that has killed so many dreams you won't even believe it. Right? Because you see all these people do it online, but you don't actually know if that applies to you. And that's what makes it so incredibly difficult. But let me be the first one to tell you that it absolutely applies to you and everybody else. Right? Yes, there are hundreds, if not thousands, of influencers out there that are lying their butts off. Right? They're lying because they have to support their lifestyle, and that is done through social media, not through trading. Right? So you're set up for failure from the beginning, because all of these scammers, right, so-called scammers, they are the faces of the industry. And so they are the people that you are naturally going to pivot towards whenever you open up YouTube for the first time and type in, technical analysis, whatever, right? Those are the people that you're going to pivot towards because there's no one else out there. But let me tell you this, even though, this industry as a whole has a bad rep, there are thousands of people out there that have absolutely no saying when it comes to social media that are printing millions and millions of dollars. Right? You just don't know about them. And if this was impossible, it wouldn't be an industry to begin with. I can promise you that. Right? And I'm living proof that it is possible, because for 3 years, I didn't sell a single thing. That means it took me 3 years to become profitable. And 3 years following that, I was trading full time. And we'll get into why I decided not to do that later in this video, because you might think that, trading for a living is a dream. And I thought the exact same thing, right? I pretty much achieved my dream, and then I ruined my own dream shortly after. Right? So it all started with me, much like anyone else, scouting YouTube, figuring out what strategy I should use, going left, right, and center, Baby Pips, if any of you guys remember that website, right? I was all over Baby Pips, and I was pretty much trying to learn and absorb as much information as I possibly could, but it was so damn difficult. The reason why it was difficult was because I, much like anyone else, thought I was the man, right? I thought I was going to be able to retire my mom. I thought I was going to be able to buy my dream car within a few months of starting within this industry. And that was just not the case. So from the beginning, my dreams were pretty much shattered, because I was hoping that I was the odd one out. I was the one that could skip the entire process and just get straight to the goal, right? And that was just not the case. You see, what you have to understand before you even decide to try out this trading thing is the fact that it's going to take time, and you cannot look at other people and say, okay, well, my friend here, he did it in, a year and a half, which means that's probably how long it's going to take me. No, not even remotely close, because what determines how long it's going to take you to get to a certain position when it comes to trading is your brain. And all of our brains are individual, right? They're super different. There's nothing objective about people's brain, right? So your brain might interpret certain things in another way than your friend, right? That's why we have psychopaths. That's why we have, all these different things, because people's brains just don't function the same, right? And so what your brain might tell you when you're under a loss, his brain might tell him the opposite, right? That's another important thing that you have to understand before you decide to even try out, trading as a whole. What you're doing is essentially rewiring your entire brain, because from the beginning, from birth, your brain is wired against you when it comes to trading. It quite literally is, because the problem is whenever you endure a loss, you want to make it possible, but your brain makes it impossible, right? So you sit there and know that, okay, I have to somehow view these losses as possible or as positive. And the reason why it's so difficult is because your brain views those losses as danger, right? And your brain does not like danger, so it tries and avoid them, right? In other words, your brain turns a positive into a negative, right? So people have been taught wrong about losing, right? Because when you lose in any other, area of your life, well, then that's negative. You lose a fight, like that's your fault. You lose a soccer match, right? That sucks. Everything in life, when you lose, is a negative, except when you lose in trading. It is, in fact, a positive, but only if you make it a positive. And that's where you have to understand it. It's what took me so long to understand. But in this video, I'm going to share with you a few tips that can really just rewire your brain almost instantaneously, okay? But as I said, I started out much like anyone else. I was failing. I was changing my strategy, week after week. Pretty much whatever strategy looked the hardest was the one that I was going for. Why? Because I figured, well, I cannot be profitable trading support and resistance. That's just too simple. And I know, right? I know money does not come easy, right? And so I figured, okay, well, I could not take this system and turn it into a profitable one because that's too simple, right? So I was deep into SMC. I was deep into order flow. I was looking into ICT, and I was doing all of this complicated stuff just to make $0 at the end of the month. Whereas nowadays, I've never had a more simple system than I have now, right? When I talk to traders that have just started out and they ask me, how do you trade? What's your system? How do you look at the market? And I tell them, they're like, what are you talking about, man? I've tried that 1,000 times, doesn't work, right? And so I was in their exact shoes, 5 years ago, pretty much, right? And it's something inside of your brain that's telling you that money cannot be made easily, and it can. It can be made incredibly easy, right? You can make money in a very easy manner. You don't have to spend a lot of energy doing it. The saying, work smarter, not harder, is incredibly accurate, and especially in this industry, because in any other, industry of your life or any other endeavor of your life, well, then hard work equals more results, right? So the more input you give, the more output you get. But that's just not, the case in trading. In fact, it's the opposite if you ask me. Right? So I know I'm rumbling a little bit here. I'm going from point to point, but I'm really just brain dumping on you so that you can understand exactly what goes on inside of my mind, because I know I can turn a lot of people into, profitable traders. And I know that, pretty much every single person out there watching has the capabilities of making this a full-time income. They just don't have the right guidance. And it's exactly why I'm making these videos, because I'm just throwing out information left, right, and center that got me into the position that I'm in today. There's one specific pattern that I quickly noticed. Well, not quickly. It actually took me about 3 years to notice this. But what I noticed was the less important trading was to me, the more money that I made. Right? So I told you that for 3 years, I was a full-time trader. The moment I turned, had other businesses that gave me income, my trading became 1,000 times easier and I made so much more money. Why? Well, because trading is a very, very emotional game. And if that is your, your sole income and you rely on that to pay your bills, well, then inevitably that's going to open up for so many mental mistakes you can't even count them. Right? And so when people come to me and say, I want to trade for a living, I don't believe them. And they probably don't know themselves yet. Right? But when you try it out, you'll quickly realize that what was once a passion of yours will quickly turn into something that you don't want to do. Right? And you're going to make so many mistakes you didn't before. It's just going to be an emotional disaster within your brain, because you now rely on this as an income. Whereas if you have something else, right, another business, whatever it is, well, then that becomes so much easier. In fact, what I have already said and what I will say again is the less attention you give trading, the more money trading gives you, right? And it's really that simple. And so I have, as I've mentioned before in a previous video on this channel, there was one fundamental change within my trading career that quite literally did this, and then I turned profitable. Maybe not literally, but almost instantaneously did I turn profitable after I implemented this within my trading. And it's incredibly simple. Trade one time per day, no more, no less, whether it's a break even, whether it's a win, whether it's a loss, it doesn't matter. You trade one time per day, you turn off your system and you go do something else. Now, what you do there, like what you do after you turn off your system is entirely up to you. You know, you can go lay on the couch, you can go do whatever you want, or you can start building another, source of income, which is inevitably going to support your trading. The problem is people think they have to actively work on trading, meaning they have to sit there and watch the screen for 8 hours straight. They have to sit there and backtest for 10 hours straight, when that's just not the case at all. In fact, the easiest way to improve as a trader is to work on things outside of trading that has a direct impact on your trading. Right? So that's things like your discipline outside of the market will inevitably reflect directly onto your P&L. In fact, I often say that a person's P&L at the end of the year is a direct reflection of his personal life. And a lot of people don't get me when I say that, but it quite literally is. You see, you cannot be disciplined in a singular area of your life. Discipline is an overall thing, right? You cannot target discipline like this. I want to be disciplined here, but not here. That's not how it works. Right? And in order to remain a profitable trader, you have to remain a disciplined individual, right? And so if your life outside of trading is a mess, well, then naturally your trading will be a mess as well. And I'm not even kidding when I say this. How many overweight, obese people have you seen be profitable and successful traders? In fact, how many obese people do you see be successful in general? Right? Not a lot. Why? Well, because what you get out of your business or what you get out of your trading is a direct reflection of yourself and your environment. Right? So don't have a cluttered space, don't have a cluttered room, don't have a cluttered office. Fix it all up, because that is, whether you believe it or not, having an indirect influence on your trading and the results, that your trading gives you. So when I tell people go work on your trading, I don't mean go look at candlesticks for 8 hours straight, because what people don't understand is the longer you look at the market, the longer you expose yourself to risk. Right? God knows how many times I've said to myself, I'm just going to not trade anymore. I'm just going to look. Right? And then inevitably my brain will start playing, these tricks on me, and it will start developing these scenarios that doesn't really exist. So something that I, at the beginning of the market, thought was complete and utter nonsense, my brain now turned into a positive and probably the best setup I've ever seen. So I kind of have to take it now. Right? And the only reason why I was able to put myself in that situation was because I stayed when I wasn't supposed to. So it basically, you can imagine it like this, right? You're put in the middle of a bomb field, right? And you have the opportunity to either leave that bomb field. You have to be out there once a day. You have to go out there and come back, right? And you can either choose to stay out there or go back into safety, right? The people that sit there and watch their screen for 10 hours straight, after they're done, they choose the bomb field. They choose to run around that bomb field looking for trouble, right? And it's the exact same thing. You can apply that exact same analogy in trading. And I know a lot of you out there might sit there and say, well, it's actually not that, it's more so the psychological part of it. Right? Whenever I trade, I tend to overtrade. Whenever I lose, I tend to risk more to try and make back what I lost, and it's all crappy, right? And the same exact rule that I just told you about, trading one time per day will inevitably fix all those mistakes. Right? Because if you trade one time per day, it's physically impossible for your green days to not be larger than your red days if you have a positive risk to reward ratio, right? And so all the mental mistakes that you guys are making can be fixed within a click. You literally have to trade one time per day and everything is fixed, right? Now you of course you should also have a static risk. That's another thing, right? A lot of people like to experiment with risk. They'll tell themselves, okay, well, this is an A+ setup, so I'm going to allocate X amount of risk to that one, whereas this one over here is not super good, so I'm not going to, put that much capital towards that one. Listen, gentlemen, whether you want to believe it or not, or whether this, hurts your trading feelings or whatever, trading is entirely random. Truthfully, it's entirely random. Whether the market goes up, down, or sideways is entirely out of your control, and nobody can predict it. Right? Because if it wasn't random, well, then it was certain. And it's definitely not certain, which makes it random. Right? And so when you tell yourself, okay, well, I'm going to attach, let's say, 5% risk to this trade because it's a high probability trade, and I'm now just going to attach 1% risk to this other trade because it's a lower probability one. First of all, if it's a lower probability one, you probably shouldn't take it in the first place. Second of all, the outcome is random, which means this setup over here that you risk 5% on, right, can fail just as much as this one, which you risked 2% on, right? And so what ends up happening a lot of the time, and I've seen this with people that I've taught, because again, I've taught thousands of people how to do this for a living. I've seen this so many times. What ends up happening is you think that this is an A+ setup, so you're going to allocate more risk towards that one. And this one is a low probability one, so you're going to attach less risk, right? You take 20 trades, these ones ends up being winners, and these on over here ends up being losers, which means now, even though technically on paper, because your risk to reward ratio is positive, you should come out on the other end as profitable. But because you decided to play the Wizard of Oz and try to, allocate different types of risk to different types of trades, well, then what should have been a net positive is now net negative, right? And so the thing you have to understand here is that trading is random. Stop trying to allocate different risk percentages to different trades. If you find a low probability one, don't take it, right? Don't say to yourself, I'm going to, risk 1% here. No, don't take it. And every other trade that you take, you risk the same amount, right? And does this apply to every single trader? No, there are plenty of profitable traders that can experiment with this themselves. But if you want to improve from this point forward, that is exactly what you should do. Why? Because that is exactly what I did. That is exactly why I'm able to buy a $30,000 watch now and live in the house of my dreams with the person that I love on the other side of the planet. Not because I was trying to be the best trader in the world, not because I was trying to allocate different risks to different positions. No, because I made my trading as simple as, humanly possible. The thing is, gentlemen, because the market is random, right? So because it is random, well, then we have basically no control, right? We have so little control as traders, and as a human, you want to be in control. That's what, feels natural. You don't like being, out of control. That's why a lot of people fear going on plane rides, because if it goes down, well, then you're completely hopeless. You're out of control. But in trading, you have to accept the fact that you're out of control, because there's nothing you can do to change it. What you can do is learn how to control the controllables. What we control is when we enter a trade, when we get out of that trade, and how much risk we allocate towards that trade. And so those three things is exactly what you should double down on. The problem is most people spend, their time studying different strategies, studying different technical analysis, trying to find this hidden gem. And gentlemen, I'm telling you, I know so many millionaire traders out there, and I can tell you with 100% confidence, there's no golden strategy. In fact, there's no strategy better than the other. Right? And you can bring up the argument of alpha decay or whatever you want, but I truly believe, because I've seen it with my own eyes, that you can be a profitable trader with any given strategy. But the simpler it is, the easier it is to have a consistently profitable strategy. Why? Because in order to have a consistently profitable system, it needs to be repeatable. And how do we make something very, very easily repeatable? Well, we make it as simple as possible. So your goal is find a system that suits you, bring it in, refine it as much as you can, and then simplify it so much to the point where it becomes second nature and you can repeat it day in, day out until you die. That is quite literally your job, and that is the simplest way to turn something negative, which is you being unprofitable, into something positive, which is you being a profitable trader, and be able to do this for a living. But I'm going to leave you with the one thing that, in my opinion, separates, and I know there's a lot of controversy regarding this. Some people think that technical analysis determines your profitability. Other people think it's your psychology, and some people think the third, right? I think that psychology is what separates a profitable trader from an unprofitable one. But more specifically, actually, this is a book which a lot of you guys should probably read. It's from a trader called Tom Hugor, right? He's made a book that's called The Best Loser Wins. And that could not be closer to the truth, in my honest opinion. The person that can take losses the best, and that's not only in trading, in my opinion, that's in life, right? So you can apply that book in every area of your life. The person that's willing to lose and has no issue losing, right, and takes losses as a positive will inevitably come out stronger than the guy who gets emotional every single time he loses, because it doesn't matter what industry you're in. You're going to have to lose over and over again in order to improve. Right? It's as simple as that. It doesn't matter what you do. You have to fail in order to become great. There's no such thing as just an upward curve towards success. That doesn't exist. But what do you do personally that can allow you to now take losses differently? I told you I had a secret, and I do have one that has quite literally changed my entire life and indirectly made me millions of dollars, and can all be found within trading in the zone. Now listen, I've told you guys this before. I've taught thousands of people how to do this, and I'd say about 20% of these people have read Trading in the Zone, and about 0% of them have implemented it, right? Because everyone talks about how great of a book Trading in the Zone is, but when I look at their performance, it doesn't reflect that in the slightest, right? Because if they had applied and understood what was being taught in that book, their performance would look significantly different. And the one takeaway that I have from that book is losses. First of all, you have to understand losses are inevitable. As we already established, right, we are trading a game based on probabilities, not certainties, right? Because otherwise it would not be random. If it's random, then it's not certain, right? So our entire system is based on probabilities, which means when something is based on probabilities, inevitably you're going to have a win, you're going to have a loser. That's probabilities, right? Now you want to be on the positive side of those probabilities, and the easiest way for you to do so is to understand losses. Losses are information. Whether you buy a cookbook, whether you want to get a degree, whether you want to get a course, whatever it is you want, in life we pay for information. It's that simple. And trading is no different. You pay for your information, and you do that through losses. Right? So losses is a positive, but only if you make it a positive. The problem is if you lose, you get mad, you overtrade, and you call it a day. That's a negative loss. But if you lose, you reflect, you refine, that's a positive loss. Right? Because losses are inevitable. I have two primary systems, and they're all based on my losses. Right? So I've crafted two systems from scratch that are based on years and years of my data, because I had the data and I was able to analyze my losses from a logic point of view. Right? Blocking out all the ego, blocking out everything, and just looking at the losses. What are my flaws? What do I need to improve on? And then building systems on top of that. Right? So the next time you endure a loss, do not make it a negative. Make it a positive, and then tell yourself, this is simply the cost of doing business. Right? I know a lot of people have made you believe that trading has no expenses. Right? We don't have to pay for ads. We don't have to pay for shipping. We don't have to pay employees. We don't have to pay for anything, except that's not true. You have to pay for your losses, and they're inevitable. And you have to pay for your information, which you do through your losses, right? And so once you learn to think about it that way, once you learn to think about it in this way, which means you now understand that losses are necessary. If you want to get to where I imagine you want to get, well, then you have to lose, because nobody gets there without losing significantly. But again, nobody gets there without studying their losses even more significantly, right? So it's all a mindset shift from trading has no expenses to losses is part of it. Losses is my expenses. Losses is the reason why I'm able to get into the position that I want to be in. So gentlemen, this was quite a rant. I really hope you guys enjoyed this video. Again, sometimes I like to sit down, just have a one-on-one talk with you. And I hope that you look at this video as if we're having a FaceTime call and I'm pretty much just, spitting out information in your face that you have to write down in your brain. You have to listen to this stuff that I'm telling you so many times to the point where it becomes second nature, because I can guarantee you that if you learn to apply this stuff that I taught you in this video, well, then there's basically no way that you will not improve to the point where this will make you money. So again, gentlemen, thank you for watching this video. And if you want to see more, well, then I would highly appreciate it if you subscribe to the channel, like the video, and drop a comment. Thank you, and I will see you in the next video.